Hi, I'm Azara Tagaya, your host for Ringgit Sense. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the cost of raising a child in Malaysia. With the cost of living going up, are new parents prepared for the financial challenges of budgeting for their kids? We spoke to one young family and asked them where does their money go to every month. Dr. Nur Shahida Sahardin is a civil servant currently working at a health clinic in the Klang Valley, while her husband, Hafiz Shahrum, is a marine engineer. They have been married 6 years and have 2 children, Safia Zafrin, 4, and Ahmad Zafir Muaz, 2.
Macam kita tahu sekarang ni perbelanjaan agak tinggi untuk membesarkan anak-anak. Perbelanjaan kami sebulan dalam lebih kurang dalam 1,700 hingga 1,900 setiap bulan untuk anak-anak. Yang paling mahal untuk persekolahan, sebab sekolah macam Safia dia play school sebulan RM410 dan pengasuh untuk Muaz sebulan RM350.
Shida and Hafiz note that the cost of raising each child is different according to their needs.
Paling mahal untuk budak-budak ni susu dengan pampers lah. Susu pun dia ada banyak jenis. Kalau susu yang bagus tu dia agak mahal sikit lah.
Kalau macam anak yang minum susu formula, memang of course susu formula yang paling mahal lah. Kalau macam anak macam Muaz, dulu dia breastfeed, so perbelanjaan untuk susu tu memang sangat kurang. Masa anak pertama tu saya tak bagi breastfeed sepenuhnya, jadi perbelanjaan untuk susu tu memang tinggilah.
Shida is grateful that her family hasn't had to spend much on medical bills.
Kalau macam anak-anak saya, diorang alhamdulillah diorang sihat, jarang ada sakit, dan saya pula bertugas sebagai pegawai perubatan, jadi saya punya kos untuk perubatan tak begitu tinggilah.
Hafiz says as parents you will only know the real cost of raising a family when the time comes.
Kalau saya tahu macam belanjaan sekarang ni, saya rasa masa muda tu saya akan buat lebih banyak simpanan lah untuk masa depan lepas kahwin.
As for now, they are looking towards the future, saving aside some money each month for their children's health and education.
Memang kami ada carungkan takaful untuk dua-dua anak, dan kami ada saving juga untuk anak-anak lah.
Berapa sebenarnya?
Macam takaful yang untuk pendidikan dan untuk medical card, 200 sebulan untuk setiap anak. Yang kami saving lain untuk diorang, memang kami saving untuk 200 setiap bulan lah untuk semua dua-dua orang.
What you just heard from Hafiz and Dr. Nur Shahida is similar to many young families out there. In our studio today is Iris Lee, the head of content for iMoney, a financial comparison website, to talk about how much money parents should set aside for the early years. Hi Iris, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so talking about how much money we should actually set aside for when we're getting ready to raise a child. Overall, how much does it really cost to raise a child in Malaysia?
It's a very subjective question. It really depends on how you want to raise your child. For example, some parents may not spend so much in the early years, but they prioritize their university, their college fund. So they save now for their future, for their kids' future. And also depends on how many children do you have. So if you have only 1 or 2, you may have the capability to spend more on each child. But if you have like 3 to 5, it will be quite difficult, especially if it's a single income family.
So let's say you're preparing for your first child. Before the child is born, you're already spending.
Yes.
Where does your money go?
For pregnancy, pregnancy you spend quite a lot in the sense that if you choose a private facilities, so from checkup to birth to baby immunization, even confinement. I mean, for a Chinese family, it's very common to have confinement a lady or confinement center. So all these cost a lot of money. So for example, let's just start with checkup. So if you go to a private hospital, from the 40 weeks, the whole 40 weeks that you go for checkup, it might cost you more than 2,000 ringgit.
For the whole duration?
Pregnancy, yes.
So one time would be about a few hundred?
Yeah, 100 plus to 200.
Okay.
So it depends. And this does not include like tests that you may be required to. Yeah. So, for example, you may want to go for a Down syndrome test. So that will cost additional, that will incur additional costs for you.
I see.
Yeah. So this is just normal ultrasound and all that. But this is private. You can get it much cheaper at a government hospital, of course. But ultrasound may not be available for every checkup.
And you may need to go to the clinic after all after that.
Yes.
Okay, so what about once the baby is born? The first few months, the first month, where does your money go?
I think even before your baby is born, you have to prepare a lot of things. You need to buy the crib, the stroller, all those things that may be required when the baby is here. So all those things also cost money. So you can estimate about 3,000 to 4,000 ringgit just to spend on all these things, from clothes and all that, and breast pumps, So birth also depends on what kind of birth. Natural birth, of course, is cheaper, and C-section is way more expensive if you go for a private hospital.
I see. So the typical situation now for most families, earning less than 5,000 a month if both parents are earning. So what would be your tip to expectant mothers or families out there earning less than 5,000 a month?
I would say do not get too excited in spending. So a lot of things nowadays we see at the mall is a nice to have item. Yeah. Your baby may not need it. So for example, you look back like during your parents' time, we don't have all these things. So why do we need it? We actually don't really need, for example, sterilizer, electronic sterilizer. So if you don't have the, you don't want to splurge, you can get away from not having all these extra things, and that will bring down your cost a lot. So, so you spend more on, you prioritize things that are more important. For example, a very good formula milk if you're not, breastfeeding, or a good diaper, that kind of thing. Good daycare, childcare center.
I see. Okay, so that's about before the baby is born and in the early months of the baby being born. So we're going to go for a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about how much it actually costs to send your child to school. So stay with us on Ringgit Sense. We are back on Ringgit Sense, and we are talking about the cost of raising a child. Okay, Iris, back to our discussion. Just now we talked about how much it actually costs for having a baby and in the early years. So let's talk now about education. You've spent all this money on baby stuff, food, clothes, formula, milk. So now it's time to make sure your kid gets a good education. So where do you start? At what age do you start spending money for education?
People nowadays send their children as young as 3 years old to preschool. It's not so much for education, but it's more for socializing, and also it also works as like daycare. If let's say they start from 3 years old, so a good private school with daycare, which is a full day program, can cost up to 1,100 ringgit a month. So if you go for the full 12 months, which is what I do because I have to work, so it can cost out to like 11,000 a year. Okay. So that is a cost that you need to consider if you have, that's only for one child. So imagine if you have like two children, so the cost will double.
I see. Okay, so do the expenses actually go down as the child grows up? Because in the beginning, you have to spend all this money on, for instance, when you're a baby. I have a friend who's having a first child. So she just told me that she bought a breast pump for 2,000 ringgit. That's only one item. And then you have clothes that cost hundreds of ringgit for one piece. And then the baby can only wear it for about a month.
Yes.
And then you have to buy new clothes. So that's a lot of money in the beginning. So does it actually go down as the child gets older?
Again, there are various options available. So, of course, if you want to go for really good premium items, it will cost you. But there are also cheaper breast pumps, cheaper clothes for kids, or you can even consider hand-me-downs from friends or family.
Okay.
So, because your kids is only going to wear it for a short time because they grow out of it very fast. So, there are many options available. It really depends on how you want to bring up your child. For example, if you have one child or you are willing to splurge, then it's okay for you to spend that much. But if you don't, you still have other options available to cut down the cost.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what are those options?
For example, there are a lot of Facebook groups that allow mothers to swap things to sell pre-loved items. So breast pumps, if you are done breastfeeding, you can always resell it at a much lower cost. So you get back some money, and other parents who don't want to spend so much, they can buy something that is pre-loved.
I see.
Yeah.
So when you do that, you sell back the stuff that you've already finished using, or you have your second child and they use hand-me-downs from their brothers or sisters. So do you agree that the cost of raising a child actually decreases with your second and third child?
Yes, and also because second and third child, you are less panicky, so you don't you are more experienced, so you know some things work, some things don't, so you don't go through a lot of trial and errors anymore. So trial and error sometimes cost money. So yeah, so
you know what to expect.
Yes, and so maybe you bought something in your during your first child when your first child was a baby, and you realize that I actually didn't use that at all. It wasn't very helpful, so you won't buy it again.
Okay, so when we come back from the break, we're actually going to talk about the upcoming budget and what are some of the wish lists for families. But before we go to the break, another one of our viewers shares how much they're spending to raise their family. More with us after this. Don't go anywhere.
Zafan Arifin and her husband Harun Jantrik has been married for 7 years and has 2 children, Dian Zahra, 4, and Abdul Haq Dani, 2. This is their basic monthly expenses for the kids. Their expenses for milk and formula is different for each child. Childcare costs almost 300 ringgit each. For food and groceries, they spend a total of almost 400 ringgit per month for both children. Clothes cost about 150 ringgit per month, but this does not apply to celebrations like Hari Raya or other holidays. They've bought medical and savings insurance totaling 300 ringgit per month, and at the same time, they also save some money in the bank. Zafan says they spent money very differently when it was just the 2 of them, but since having offspring, every bit of money spent has to be carefully evaluated, even when it comes to buying things that Zafan or her husband wants. When they had their first child, they spent almost 600 ringgit per month on milk and formula. But since having their second child, they've switched to a cheaper brand for both kids. Safe to say, their spending patterns also change with the addition of each child. As a young and growing family, these are a few items in their 2018 budget wish list. First, GST exemption for milk and formula for all child age groups, and not just for those under 3 years old. Also, GST exemption for children's goods such as clothes, soap, lotion, and others, as she says logically, these goods are for use by children who are not yet earning an income. Another hope is for government subsidies for children aged 5 to 6 years old who are sent to kindergarten, as the fees are high. Shorter working hours for working mothers, perhaps by at least 30 minutes, to enable them to pick up their children from childcare centers on time, as most charge an additional 5 ringgit for each child. Also, more support from the government towards local universities. Last year, the budget for local universities was cut, resulting in higher learning institutions having to raise their tuition fees.
Hello there, you're still with me, Azara Tagaya, back on Ringgit Sense, and we are still talking about the cost of raising children. Okay, so Iris, before the break we talked about education and sending your kid to preschool or kindergarten. So what's the difference between education in the early years and also for primary school?
For early years, a lot of urban parents would choose private kindergartens and preschools. So obviously that is going to cost more.
Yeah.
But for primary and secondary, they have the option of national schools, of course. But there are other costs involved as well, even if you choose national schools. For example, a lot of parents would send their children to tuition classes. And private tuition classes cost quite a lot because they have this notion that whatever they learn in national school is not enough. So they need extra help. So for primary school, they probably also need a half-day daycare because they can't be leaving their children at home after school. Yeah. So that roughly costs about 82,000, for example, if you are assuming 500 a month on tuition and about 600 a month for daycare. So secondary school, it will be cheaper because we don't need daycare anymore. But tuition, we may need more. It will cost more.
Yes.
So it costs about 35 to 40 ringgit per hour per subject. So let's break that down. It could cost up to 36,000 throughout the secondary school period.
Oh, throughout the
from
secondary
1 to
school.
Form 5.
For tuition?
Yes, for tuition. So even though you are saving in school fees, because it's free to go to a national school, but you may be paying for tuition. So it depends on what's your priority.
I see. So how can parents save this way? Do they go for, because you can take per subject, so you only go for the subjects which you need help in?
Yes. So of course you need to have the cooperation from your children as well, that they will work hard for other subjects because you can't afford to go for tuition for every subject. Yeah. So this will all depends on the way you bring up your children, I guess.
Okay.
So a lot of urban upper middle class families choose private schools nowadays. There are actually, statistics saying that there are more enrollments compared to last time in private and international schools. So the cost is significantly higher, but a lot of them do not go for tuition classes. Yeah, so that is a different option for those more affluent families.
I see. Okay, so when having a child, let's talk about the parents for a moment. Some mothers debate whether or not to go back to work. So what would be your advice to people who are weighing this option?
Honestly, if you have a few children, it's increasingly hard to survive on a single income if you are in the middle class and all that. So, for example, 5,000 plus household income, the average household income today. So it's very hard to support so many children on top of other financial commitments. So if you, either spouse, is okay to find another job, find a job or find a second job to help out, it will, of course, help significantly in the household expenses. But it also depends on how much you can cover. So if you go to work, both parents go to work, there are a lot of costs involved. Like you have to send your kids to daycare, or you incur a lot of costs. Maybe both parents will need to have a car to go to work. So those are the costs that are additional costs. So you compare it to if you stay at home. What can your salary, can the additional salary cover that? So that's what, if you're considering staying at home or not, there's something that you need to, really be truthful and honest and list down everything, all your expenses and compare.
What would be some items in your 2018 budget wish list?
Actually, last year was quite a good year for parents. We have a lot of new reliefs, tax reliefs for parents. For example, the breastfeeding tax reliefs, early education tax reliefs, all that. And I would expect the same or more for the upcoming budget. But I would also, my wish list is also would like to see more programs in the private sector to help both parents go to work. So, for example, a lot of multinational companies now have their own daycare center, which is provided by the company. So this helps mothers to, not worry about daycare costs or who's going to care for their children while they work. So it will also help the, the national target of getting more women to join the workforce. So that is one way to help. And instead of giving them just money, subsidy and all that, which you're not sure what they're going to spend on, I think we should support them in a different way so they can also have an income and be independent.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it then, I guess. Thank you so much, Iris, for joining us and sharing with us some tips on raising a family.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you're planning to have a child or you already have kids, our tip is to make a budget and then stick to it. Now, if you want to watch the discussion today or the stories we've aired, go to our Facebook page, Ringgit Sense TV3. I'm Azara Tagaya, and I will see you next week.